Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tulsa World Opinion podcast. I'm Ginnie Graham, editorials editor with Tulsa World, and I am joined today with Representative John Waldron. He represents District 77 in Tulsa. And can you take a minute and remind us what are your boundaries? Where is District 77?
Well, it's from 11th Street to the airport and from the Rogers County line to the University of Tulsa. Right at the heart of my district is the Admiral Twin Drive.
Which is a good time to go to the Admiral Twin. I was just driving by there yesterday. So
yeah, that's right.
I have asked Representative Waldron to be on the podcast this week because he's written an op-ed, which everyone's going to read this weekend because it's really thought-provoking. It's a good op-ed, and it touched on something that struck me last week as well that no one has addressed, and it's when the state superintendent of schools, Ryan Walters, he cut and paste the entire American Library Association's rainbow list, 190 books, and called it, you'll have to remind me, questionable or possible porn, and it's not, but we'll get to that. But I wanted to find out, that sort of got lost in a lot of things. What prompted you to write this op-ed talking specifically about that?
Well, the rainbow list came to us in a hand-delivered packet of material, including images he purported to be pornographic, and he alleged that they were, without any evidence, alleged that these were found in our schools. And that offended me. But after I dug into the rest of the list, I was even more offended when I saw what he was really after. He went after the rainbow list, not individual books. He just took the whole list. And, the underlying message here is that it's not pornography that he's concerned about. It's inclusiveness. He's against inclusiveness. And so he went after a list that was designed not just to be inclusive for LGBT readers, but for its diversity, for representing the experiences of all kinds of Americans, and not just the kind that Ryan Walters would want you to know about.
Well, and that's interesting because in that op-ed, just like I did, I pulled up the list, and a lot of those books had nothing to do with sex or gender or even LGBTQ issues. It was, a children's book of a boy whose dog kept him up at night. So his two dads had to sort of come up with little tricks to help him get to sleep. It was a girl was missing her mom on a trip, so her other mom had to come up with adventures. It had nothing to do with, oh, I have two moms. It was about the trip or the adventure. But one of the things that frustrates me, we looked into that, but there are other people who won't do that. They just sort of go with what they hear and they don't investigate. So isn't there sort of a bigger problem here with people not digging into what the facts are, not questioning that, and just because Ryan Walters was elected, those sort of, tilting at windmill kind of things seem to be working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you voted for Ryan Walters on the basis of his rhetoric, well, he keeps using rhetoric that's not grounded in reality, that he doesn't present evidence for, and he uses this rhetoric about, our libraries or the books available to our schools. And while he's talking about those things, he's ignoring the very important practical day-to-day operations of the State Department of Education, the things that are really going to matter to the 700,000 Oklahoma school children. So I think we need to dig a little deeper, stop being distracted by his circus antics, and focus on delivering quality education to all those kids in our public schools.
You made a point about diversity earlier, and that's become sort of another trigger word that I didn't think would ever become a problematic word. And there is something to be said about kids need to read books that reflect their reality.
Yeah.
But I also kind of see that kids need to read books outside their reality, that there are other families and there seems to be a sticking point with that, where do you think this came from, this kind of the Ryan Walters morality crusade and this pushback against people who are different?
Well, I think if you look, if you peel back the top layer of the morality crusade, I think it reflects a very disturbing agenda that wants to push gay people back into the closet, that wants to promote a pre-Brown versus Board of Education view of America, and wants to ignore the fact that, our urban districts are majority minority. Oklahoma is a much more diverse place than it was even 10 years ago. But while he's talking about CRT and DR and DEI, he's being a little NSFW. And I think the whole purpose of that is to, turn the clock back. Kids don't need to live in Ryan Walters' idealized past. They need to live in their own present, and they need to build their future. So the Rainbow List is really important because it reaches out to kids and shows them what the world is and can be like.
And what they're going to find. I mean, I grew up in rural Oklahoma, and there was very white, very, Protestant Christian. But when, you leave those worlds, those kids need to be prepared for that. And so, trying to get that understood in small towns might be a challenge. But I've always said that literature is to introduce you to things that you don't know, not just reflect what you do know. But one of the, I found it interesting because you mentioned it was in a packet, and I just have to make this point. He deemed these images porn.
Right.
He's the one that's disseminating pornography. I mean, if you have images that you think are porn, you don't go, you know what? I think every member of the state legislature ought to see this. Hit send. I just find that mind blowing that he must have this on his phone and sending it. But in that, can you provide some background and context as to how this is being perceived by the House members, by the House leadership? What are some things that are pressing right now in regard to Ryan Walters and actions in the House?
Well, I think we've all learned not to click on any attachments the Superintendent Walters might send us. Well, the truth is we're not really very focused on his morality crusade. We're much more concerned about federal pass-through dollars that are received through grants written by grant writers of the State Department of Education. Are we writing those grants? Are those being approved and submitted to the federal government? Are we receiving pass-through dollars for transportation, nutrition, special education? That's one of the primary functions of the State Department of Education. And we don't have a lot of evidence that he's doing his job. Instead, he's going on this morality crusade. So the Committee on Education, Appropriations, and Budget has twice requested that Walters come in and answer questions. Superintendent Walters has so far refused to appear, and it has instead twice sent us what he said were pornographic images, and he's continued his morality crusade. It's up to the legislature to review our public officials and hold them accountable on behalf of 700,000 school children. And it's a little disturbing that so far this superintendent has dodged that responsibility.
So what you've mentioned the federal funding and some other things happening that the House wants to ask him about. What are some of the things that the House members are hearing that you want to get to the bottom of? What are some of the management issues that concern you?
Well, I'm hearing that he's not approving the grant applications that are being written by staff at the State Department. So they never get to Washington. So we never get a chance to receive our share of the federal dollars for important programs. We know that a lot of staff have departed, his entire communications team. He fired the woman that organized the Teacher of the Year ceremony that he showed up late to and unprepared for. So I think there's reason to believe that there's a culture of intimidation going on in the State Department, and the few employees that are still in the building are afraid to speak out for fear of losing their jobs. So who's minding the store and what's being done? When it comes to things like child nutrition, transportation, special education, we receive a lot of federal dollars to help us achieve our constitutionally mandated job of educating all the children. So he's got real responsibilities. Is he living up to them? We want to know.
So if the federal dollars are not being sent on, if we miss deadlines or it's not approved, when does it all come crashing down at the districts? When will the districts start saying, oh, I have no funds for my buses, I have no funds for child nutrition? When does that reality hit?
I think we're going to start to see real signs of problems very soon, maybe before the end of the school year. And we may have to act to take responsibilities away from the State Department of Education and transfer them to other agencies that will do the job. That's really disappointing, considering that we never had these problems under Superintendent Hoffmeister.
So what are some of the things beyond this, the measures? We have a teacher shortage still. We've got raises. what are some of the things you think that are going to be accomplished this year? I know that's deadline week for the legislature. Everything changes by the minute, but do you see some solutions to some of those bigger problems happening yet?
I think we're chipping away at some of the important ones. We've got some good bills on our side that deal with, reducing bureaucratic burdens on teachers. I think we'll get a teacher raise done, and we'll see increased funding in the funding formula on a per pupil basis for all the districts. Those are all good things, but we need to do a lot more. The teacher shortage gets worse every year. And the rhetoric we hear out of from Superintendent Walters when he goes after the certification of teachers, when he accuses schools of doing things they're not doing, that sends a bad message. The number of young people interested in going into education declines every year because they see how little respect the profession gets from the elected officials who are supposed to be looking after our teachers. So we in the legislature need to step up and provide more support when the superintendent won't stop his culture war.
I wanted to go back, and you mentioned that he's twice denied not appearing before committee. What can ultimately happen? Can a person just refuse? I mean, what could be the consequence, if the worst consequence?
We do have subpoena powers, and maybe it's time to use them. Yeah, well, we have subpoena powers, and I'd like to see us use those. He's no longer the Secretary of Education, and maybe that's a sign that he's not going to be protected from higher up anymore, so that we can finally hold him accountable. This has been a struggle all through the session, and I don't want this superintendent to run out the clock on accountability. So I'm hopeful that we're going to act within the next few weeks.
So we understand that this, morality crusade, this porn in schools, it's really a distraction. But there are people who buy into that distraction, like we said before, and I hear it all the time. People are, concerned about it. They maybe don't have kids in school. They're watching a lot of news they probably shouldn't. What do you tell people who believe it, who think this is a problem? What's your response to them?
Well, I think parents need to be more involved in the lives of their kids and in their schools. Go to back to school night, attend school board meetings, check out what's in your child's backpack, and talk to them about what they're learning every day. I think they're going to find that our public schools and our public libraries are doing great things for their children every day. We need to stop listening to outsiders and people who don't have a stake in the system, or people who have an ulterior motive of, say, moving public dollars into private schools and private programs. We got to stop listening to those voices and focus on what is really important to us: our communities, our neighborhood schools, and the education of our children. Folks, there are people out here who are just trying to distract you because they've got their own agendas here in Oklahoma City. And we should be asking hard questions about why they're saying these things. The rest is talk to your kids, find out what they think and need. And remember, their future does not belong to us, it belongs to them.
Yeah, I have the best conversations with my teenagers. They will tell you exactly what's going on. And I've always thought if people would just talk to them more, they would learn so much. I mean, it's incredible. So, but I want to thank you for your time. And I always want to give the guests a last word. So what are the thoughts and words you want to leave us with?
Yes, I would say follow the money and see if you are seeing that the same people who are saying that our public schools are full of critical race theory and pornography are also the politicians advocating that we move public dollars out of the public schools and into the hands of affluent citizens who are already sending their kids to private schools through vouchers or any other kind of scheme. This may all be an elaborate effort to defund our public schools and move public resources into private hands where there's going to be very little accountability and zero transparency. We remember what happened with Epic Youth Services. Maybe what we're seeing is a new drive to make a lot of money for a very small number of people. Folks, don't be fooled.
I appreciate that. And I'm still looking for the $8 million that Ryan Walters was in charge of with the pandemic money. So I think,
where did it go?
I think Representative Mark McBride is wondering the same thing. So anyway, thank you for your time. Everyone should read this op-ed, and we'll see you in Tulsa when you come back for your office hours on Friday, right?
All right. Yeah, on Sunday. I'll be at the Freeway Cafe on 4th and South Sheridan Sunday morning.
Go buy him a cup of coffee. He's doing the Americans' work here. So thank you very much and have a good weekend.
All right, you too, Ginny. You have a great day and best of luck with your kids.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.